This Halloween, come join us for a look at times past, to the nostalgic value of casual sexism.
We agreed you'd handle the glamour and I'd handle the business. Did we not, sister?
Political stereotypes.
We have reported a slight tremor, comrades. Please investigate.
Toxic masculinity.
It is fortunate that I brought my flares.
Yeah, if you hadn't, you'd have been totally useless.
And Reaganomics.
Where are you going?
The unemployment office.
All this brought to you by the 1980s. It's like Rodimus Prime said.
No one is innocent! Down in the fiery depths of the earth where nightmares begin.
You know, I didn't choose to review this out of any particular wokefulness. That is what the young people are calling it these days, right? I just remembered that once upon a time, Hasbro decided to take a shot at horror. An interesting idea, given the Hasbro lineup. Oh, look at the little ponies going to play!
Behold the undead horrors coming to steal your soul.
Here come the Autobots surfing in to save the day.
Your fellow humans now serve the terror centuries older than your civilization.
Jem is dancing the night away.
So is this one.
Hey, even nightmares from the Earth's core have to succumb to boogie fever. Yet looking back over this series, especially the 5-part opener, it's startling to realize just how much you don't pick up on as a kid. A lot of themes and presentations that aren't just embarrassing later in life, but possibly harmful. Like so many products of the time, Inhumanoids was a toy line first and a cartoon second, with a Marvel comic on the side as a safety. The toys set up the characters for the show, and the show generated demand for the toys. Produced by Sunbow Entertainment and Marvel Productions, Inhumanoids had a different run than many other Hasbro cartoons. Rather than a dedicated half-hour episode, the story unfolded in 7-minute segments that aired on the Super Sunday block, alongside Jem, Robotics, and Bigfoot and the Muscle Machines. How is it that Bigfoot features in 2 shows from my childhood, when I never once took an interest in monster trucks? Questions for later. Our story opens in the Big Sur National Forest and the discovery of a massive creature's skeleton encased in amber. We have word that an eccentric billionaire has a very special interest in this find.
Spared no expense.
But something's up with the trees in the Big Sur as they start sprouting claws and glowing eyes. No time for that, however, because we transition to a drilling operation.
Take the drill down 2 miles.
What a calm and collected sounding fellow. I'm sure he's only got the best intentions with such a massive command. Especially when it causes a quake that sends the staff running, blows up millions of dollars worth of equipment, and unleashes something.
So the ancient documents were right.
I have the sneaking suspicion that he might be the bad guy. Anywho, these 2 disparate events culminate at an event in San Francisco, where we get to meet we get to meet EarthCorps and Sandra Shore. Rather than the hippie group this name implies, EarthCorps is supposed to be a collection of scientists who work within the US military. They're pretty easy to distinguish because there's only one personality trait per character. Herc Armstrong, geologist. Role, team leader. Personality, team leader. Jonathan M. Slattery, aka Liquidator, chemist, spelunker, and expert in sundry arcane sciences. You can tell he's new age because he uses special terms.
Remember the vibes?
Vibes? Let's be a little more professional, Liquidator.
That guy with the pole up his bottom is Derek Bright. He's a geologist and inventor, so he always acts super smart and full of himself. He's the one who develops most of the EarthCorps tech. Building that tech falls to Eddie, better known as Augur, former boxer, archaeologist, engineer, and enemy to all televisions.
Reminding you. Signing off.
Augur, aren't you ever gonna grow up?
His personality is that he's a jerk. And finally we reach Sandra Shore. She is the woman. That's it. Her chief role throughout this series will be serving as the object of affection.
What do you think she's doing after the party?
I find it very unlikely she'd be seen with you.
Okay, I'm not going to condemn someone for finding a beautiful, intelligent, and wealthy woman attractive. But because this show was designed for a young male audience, it's unnerving to see the treatment she gets moving forward. But before that bit of social horror, we have a more physical one as the creature within the amber starts breaking free. At the same time, the tentacle monster that escaped, known as Tendril, makes its way across the bridge. This gives rise to the greatest terror in the show, EarthCorps' one-liners.
It's trashing the bridge. Yeah, and I bet it's not even paying the toll.
This is where EarthCorps' shallowness can wear thin. In an attempt to match the 80s action hero movies, these guys don't respond to any sort of human emotion. They quip, some of which can be witty or fun, and others just awful. Tendril is making short work of the San Francisco police, whose budget apparently includes lasers and missiles. I'd have an easier time believing this if it were set in LA. I hope the budget allows for funeral arrangements, because it looks like these two are dead. Nope, wait, I forgot. This is an 80s cartoon. Everyone parachutes to safety.
Earth Core, suit up!
Alright, now we're talking! I am a sucker for the concept of combat armor. I don't care if it's the human shape of Halo's Mjolnir armor or the bulky powerhouses of Warhammer 40k's Space Marines. I go gaga for the blending of advanced technology with the iconography of a knight. So the Earth Core don their no. This armor isn't designed to invoke any sense of chivalry. Inhumanoids was designed to play on a sense of fear and unfamiliarity. That means that even the lead characters were designed to look otherworldly. In some ways, this is a strength, as these definitely aren't looks that scream, "We're the good guys." But bubbly shapes and odd proportions also don't make them look ready for a fight. And it's not much of a fight as Tendril storms his way into the museum to free Decompose.
Release me, Tendril!
Fellow fans of 80s cartoons might recognize some of these voices. Indeed, Sunbow and Marvel kept drawing from the same talent pool. Augur's voice actor, Michael Bell, is known for voicing G.I. Joe's Duke and My Little Pony's Grogar. William Calloway voiced Liquidator alongside with Beachhead. What does Herc have in common with Transformers and G.I. Joe? Alongside Springer and Shipwreck, his voice actor is Neil Ross. And Decompose owes his voice to the late, great Christopher Collins, who voiced Starscream and Cobra Commander, and on it goes. Faster to check the IMDb listing for all the shared talent. Though I think Collins mistook his role as Decompose for that of a Pokemon.
What is that thing?
The two Inhumanoids escape, forcing the Earth Core to divide their search between the forest where the Amber Monolith resided, the drill shaft that freed Tendril, and the San Francisco Bay. It's here that we hammer in the point that Earth Core is having a really bad day. The Inhumanoids destroy Herc and Augur's sub, forcing them to retreat to a tropical island in San Francisco Bay? Bright's investigation is hampered by the little matter of attempted murder. He's just found Tendril's holding cell, with strange markings that might denote the safe word, when all of a sudden... not a bad scream, but let's try... Or maybe... And Liquidator? He runs afoul of Redland and the Redwoods, the first of the three Mutor races. Turns out that centuries ago, they fought the Inhumanoids and managed to imprison them. Humans were present, but too weak to make any difference. The Inhumanoids' release shows that technology has advanced where humans have more of an impact, but against these creatures' size and strength, we're still at a major disadvantage. Having survived these various threats, Earth Core's headquarters is then destroyed, because the Inhumanoids know how to hold a grudge. Meanwhile, our human antagonist, Blackthorn Shore, is pursuing his own agenda. Let us pause to consider the unspoken monsters in this story. Blackthorn's parents. Who names their kid Blackthorn? Let's be clear, an IDW Comics character named Blackthorn is the best deer in the Everfree Forest and a more competent leader than his own king. Naming a human Blackthorn doesn't carry the same meaning. You might as well have named the kid Evil Guy McEyepatch, because who but a villain wears an eye patch? Well, okay, but who in an animated show is good while wearing an eye patch? Dang it, Japan, you're making it really hard for me to generalize.
It's a disgrace to be your sister, Blackthorn.
That's about as far as their sibling relationship goes. Blackthorn is flexing his political and economic muscle to cut out the Earth Core and acquire their tech. All part of his not-so-masterful plan. Meanwhile, Sandra has to contend with his thugs. A slow-mo fight in The Matrix is artistic and a technical marvel. A slow-mo fight in a cartoon is bad animation. Context is everything. EarthCore's first foray into the underworld doesn't go well. After getting swept away by a broken water main, they get ambushed. Decompose is the icon for this series, even more than his boss Metlar. A combination of a skeleton and zombified flesh, he'd imprisoned characters in his rib cage, a grotesque idea made real by the toy's size. There's a reason why the series is named for the monsters. Their toys were huge, while the heroes were scaled down. In a way, the Inhumanoids were the main characters and everything else was an accessory. Something for Decompose to store in his ribs, or Tendril to hold in his kung fu action grip. The point of this first foray, besides padding out the runtime, is to show that Earth Core isn't ready. The only reason they make it out alive is because the Redwoods and another Mutor race, the Granites, intervene. And with their operation officially declared a boondoggle, why don't we use fun words like that anymore? They're officially out of resources. Until Sandra Shore appears and offers to fund their next expedition, with one catch.
I'm coming with you.
Oh, wait a minute. It won't be.
There are a lot of practical reasons to refuse her. Lack of training and experience. Not risking the one person willing to financially support their operation. Maybe their tactics are designed around a 4-person squad and there isn't time to reinvent the wheel. But given the larger context of what we've seen and will see, it's because they don't want to break up the all-boys club. Don't believe me? Let's consider the armaments for each suit. Armstrong lives up to his name with a grappling hook. And admit it, we've all wanted for a grapple gun at some point in our lives. Augur has a drill arm that can feature attachments like blades and grenades. You know, the basics. Liquidator could change his name to Deus Ex Machina, because he can mix just about anything and spray it as a weapon. He gets the award for the most saves on offensive moves due to 80s science baloney. Bright has claws that can dig through stone and allow him to pitch boulders. And Sandra? She gets a garbage can with thin arms and a triangular chest plate. It's revealed very late that this suit may have some kind of built-in laser, but she never uses it. In fact, she often forgets to put on the bug-eyed helmet. Sandra never got a toy in the lineup. Not even a prototype, which is a terrible move by Hasbro, and I can attest to this as a child who wanted a Chitara figure, and a Scarlet and Lady J, and always wished that RC got a flippin' figure. Seriously, modern day Transformers fans do not know their good fortune. And it didn't matter how often April O'Neil got captured, I still wanted a figure of her because she was part of the story. And story is not well served if you exclude someone on the premise of gender. So with some new toys, vehicles, Earth Core sets out once again. A rematch with Decompose shows that their technology is closing the gap between humanity and the monsters, but not quite. Decompose reveals his ability to corrupt and control anything organic, such as giant bats. Little known but obvious in hindsight fact, the way to make anything scarier is to make it a ghoulish skeleton.
A most extraordinary woman.
See, that situation could work much better and stand the test of time if they just said, not bad for a rookie. Yet while Earth Core finally manages to win a battle, Tendril is at an underground fortress where a granite guard is, I think he's asleep at his post? Get used to that motif. So now it's humans and granites versus Decompose and Tendril, or rather Tendrils, as severing limbs ends up creating more monsters. Something similar to the idea of the Deathless Hydra, which might explain why the granites are relying on crushing boulders rather than bladed weapons. Here's where we finally meet Metlar, imprisoned by the final Mutor, Magnacore. This guy is always at odds with himself, because he can split into polar opposites, Crygen and Pyre.
You're a coward, Crygen!
Cowardice is not the issue, survival is.
Once Magnacore is captured and Metlar free, this becomes a rout. It probably doesn't help that Earth Core keeps forgetting to don their helmets. See? Helmets on, helmets off. Helmets on, helmets off. And how can our heroes defeat this pinnacle of evil, this beast that fans often liken to the devil himself?
Get me off my back!
Being a creature of fire, stone, and metal, it's been suggested that Metlar's greatest weakness is water. That makes more sense because right now, I'm having a hard time taking a villain seriously when he has the exact same weakness as Futurama's Bender. Yet even with this turtle-esque weakness, Earth Core has to retreat, which is when Blackthorn makes his move and oh come on! His environmental suit is pitch black as well? There's branding and then there's just posing. Here's his grand plan. Freeing the first two Inhumanoids was just a setup so they could free Metlar. Using his own environmental suit, complete with magnets, he now controls the metal monster.
From now on, I am your master! Come no closer, Inhumanoids, or I'll destroy your leader!
This is not the dumbest plan I've ever seen, but that's only because I've seen Meet the Robinsons. Blackthorn has basically set himself up in a no-win scenario. He would have to keep Metlar under his control 24/7, never resting or slipping or recharging his suit. Plus he has no countermeasures for the other two other than that rather weak threat, which may in fact be a bluff as we later learn that Metlar can't be destroyed, only contained. The only thing he succeeds in doing is getting Sandra to stumble into Decompose's grip. It's here with his infectious touch that we get the standout scene.
I am one with
Well, now that his sister is in danger, perhaps Blackthorn will show some humanity, set aside his agenda, and work with EarthCorp.
Thanks, suckers!
Right. Forgot the level of character depth we were facing.
Probably the first guys who've ever run away from her.
Wow. That was the most tone-deaf and sexist quip you could come up with.
If she doesn't do something about her looks, he won't be the last.
Never mind. We just keep lowering the bar here. It's not for that remark that I say this now. Augur should be the one turned into a monster. In an earlier fight with those skeletal bats, his suit was damaged and his respirator pipe torn. He refused to go back to the surface, prideful in his engineering. So seeing his pride lead to a downfall might be a good lesson on its own. More than that, having the team risk it all to save the most hostile member has a certain nobility. And I realize now that this show is lacking something often seen in other cartoons. To set the context for this, I need to quote Robert McKee, a screenwriter and story lecturer often described as the Aristotle of our time. In his book Story, he describes that story is about archetypes, not stereotypes. The archetypal story unearths a universally human experience, then wraps itself inside a unique, culturally specific expression. A stereotypical story reverses this pattern. It suffers a poverty of both content and form. It confines itself to a narrow, culture-specific experience and dresses it in stale, non-specific generalities. When I rewatch a lot of 80s cartoons, I do see the universal human experience, even in characters that are not themselves human. G.I. Joe has the theme of fighting for freedom wherever there's trouble. And though they are supposed to be rough and tumble soldiers, there were plenty of memorable scenes beyond the battlefield. The Thundercats had their own code.
Justice, truth, honor, and loyalty.
He-Man rushed to aid anyone in trouble, using the same rotoscoped run. And the Autobots? Despite waging their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons, they never lost sight of the humans caught in the crossfire. They went out of their way to protect others and, in time, tried to act as peacekeepers. Very direct peacekeepers.
This peace conference is hereby reconvened.
And if you gave most cartoons a chance, their characters could surprise you.
Now that you're back in circulation, who's your date tonight? Someone very special.
What then can we say about EarthCorp? Well, they've not gone out of their way to save anyone. Their research wasn't geared towards improving mankind's lifestyle. At least not in any way I could tell. Though each of them has a scientific background, none express any curiosity or insight. In fact, there's really only one motif behind their actions.
If his friends release him, we're ended. We're fighting for the survival of Earth.
This is a story about survival. The Inhumanoids want to destroy the surface and reshape it in their image. EarthCorp wants to preserve it because that's where they live. Nothing they've said or done hints that there's any higher motive. I understand that you can't pursue ideals like heroism, honor, and other-centered actions if you don't yet have survival down. But there comes a point where survival isn't enough. Keeping a pulse going is the bare minimum, and people, by their nature, eventually seek more. To further quote Mr. McKee, flawed and false storytelling is forced to substitute spectacle for substance, trickery for truth. Weak stories, desperate to hold audience attention, degenerate into multi-million-dollar razzle-dazzle demo reels. And the one thing for which Inhumanoids is praised is that it is visually grim. The heavy use of shadows, the frightening imagery, the unnerving character designs and movement. True, there are the classic 80s animation glitches, choppy editing, and characters speaking with the wrong voice, but there is still a very well done visual spectacle. Sandra's transformation exemplifies how this got stuck in our memory. It's a frightening scene, especially in a kids show. Yet once you get past that visual appeal, there's very little substance. The EarthCorp's next move is to bully and threaten the Granites into cooperation. No time for reflection or character growth. It's time to divide and not screw up. Bright recruits the Redwoods, who go all whomping Willow on Tendril at a power plant. By comparison, Bright got the easy job. What was Tendril doing there? Metlar needs a power source to help give life to statues, like the Confederate statues Tendril stole from Gettysburg. Ho, this has not aged well at all.
Lee ordered Pickett's charge right on this very battlefield. The Yanks stopped him, and the war was pretty much over.
Why are you sounding so disappointed? Augur and Liquidator are on their way to the Earth's core to free Magnacore.
Nearly every ancient culture had some kind of vision about the underworld. Maybe it's part of the collective unconscious.
Oh yeah, I wonder about that all the time.
Alas, Carl Jung is wasted on many. Maybe Augur would like it more if he knew that Jung was very sexist himself, to the point where seeing a woman wear anything other than a dress was offensive. Sometimes you love the ideas more than the person. But Liquidator is not entirely correct. These legends weren't literal. The underworld, much like the deep sea or any other forbidden realm, is often a reflection of our own subconscious, which we populate with monsters born from fear and desire. Metlar is often described as a proxy for the devil, and he could represent our own desires for power and to assert our will. Decompose's death motifs reflect our own fear of mortality, and Tendril is a being of pure violence combined with an undying vice. It's odd that the monsters offer more food for thought than the humans they combat. See what I mean when I say the Inhumanoids are the main characters? Despite an attack by the Lava Tyrant, the two make it to Magnacore and provide a distraction as he frees himself. It helps that Blackthorn shows up and tries to control Metlar, again, and he fails, again. This might be fun if he weren't being portrayed as an intimidating figure. Starscream and Cobra Commander failed all the time, and their shrill tones and cowardice made it strangely endearing. Herc and the Granites travel to Skullweb, where the corrupted Sandra resides. It's a necropolis populated by skeletal warriors.
Skeletal warriors! But how do you kill something that's already dead?
Turns out you just shoot them. Shooting them seems to work. Although this fight is pretty brutal, as I think we witnessed several Granites die. Dealing with Sandra isn't any easier, since she's now a giant and bought into that whole ribcage storage theme. Huh, maybe those Granites didn't die after all. If they can't be smashed, what threat is there? They can outlast almost any opponent. Herc manages to bring the house down, exposing the sun. Guess they were much closer to the surface than I thought. Even Sandra's reversion sounds creepy.
And transformed back into her lovely self.
Et tu, announcer guy?
Herc, there are some things I have to tell you.
Oh, hell no! It's rare that I say I do not ship it, but given what I've seen so far, plus the absence of any real interaction, I will not buy into this. But it's not all good news as Decompose succeeds in stealing a power plant's core while the guards are asleep, again. And with that power, they put the statues back? I guess this is meant as an ambush, since EarthCorps would come to investigate.
Yankees!
Oh no, they're doing this?
What do you mean, darn Yankees? Trust them rebels to mess up a good alliance! Charge!
They're doing this. Can you imagine how this would go down in a modern context? So if I'm to accept your accounting, my hitherto unconscious existence has sparked controversy, alienation, and even violence between the citizenry, to a point where it is no longer a division between the North and the South, but an ideological divide that reaches the very level of direct neighbors?
Pretty much, yeah.
I see.
Hey, where are you going?
To the most immediately available magma pool, courtesy of this Metlar. In life, the real and true Robert E. Lee wrote, I think it wiser, moreover, not to keep open the sores of war, but to follow the example of those nations who have endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife, to commit to oblivion the feelings engendered. Better that I be melted and forgotten, allowing a nation to heal, than serve as a gangrenous wound's core.
The president just said on Twitter that you're a historical embarrassment and a traitor. Sad.
My namesake was in the habit of defying presidential views one way or another. Thus I had been named such before. As to the medium of this denouncement, what in the world is a Twitter, and, most important, why should I care? And if you think that's bad, just wait until you see how they portray the Russians.
Resist alien imperialism, comrades!
Yep. The Inhumanoids attack a Soviet base and even manage to corrupt several soldiers who were sleeping through the attack. Seriously, does this world require some sort of universal nap time? The whole point of this attack, story-wise, is to claim 2 cluster missiles that Metlar plans to use on the Earth's crust. Rend the land, block the sun, and take over. However, there's a reason why it's not a United States base they attack. Because here's the thing, those corrupted soldiers, we never see them freed. This show is a product of its time, and we weren't supposed to feel bad for communists. But as bad as this propaganda looks, it wasn't the worst thing in 80s cartoons.
This is Abdul Fakadi, Supreme Military Commander, President for Life, and King of Kings of the Socialist Democratic Federated Republic of Karbamia.
It's at this point that the US government, represented by Senator Masterson, humbles itself before EarthCorps and asks for their aid. Blackthorn has miraculously returned to the surface and told them of the Inhumanoids' plans.
You see, I haven't been completely honest with you, gentlemen. We agreed that I would rule the few islands that would remain after the blast.
If he wasn't willing to change his plans to save his sister, then I'm not at all surprised he decided to turn traitor on the human race. What I am surprised by is his stupid brand of evil. As the head of the shore company, he had the power to bully the government and likely could influence international power. By comparison, ruling a broken world where everyone would hate him seems like a downgrade in range and influence. So the first cluster missile detonates, causing massive damage to the crust and toppling whole skyscrapers. I think we're supposed to care more about this because it's happening on American soil, and in this post-9/11 world, this cartoon seems all the more tone-deaf. Because the impact of this tragedy will never come up. Everyone will carry on as if nothing has happened because, again, these characters haven't the depth to understand. EarthCore's mission involves them discovering a new area, falling through its floor, and then repeating. They continue to fall, recover, and press on until they encounter Decompose and Tendril once again. Only this time they try reasoning with the monsters.
Don't you see? Metlar plans to destroy you too when the elemental core blows!
Don't be a fool, Decompose!
And that works. For a brief time, the two align with EarthCore and take out a Guardian statue.
Good work, Decompose!
Sandra, he turned you into a monster. I think you can suspend civil pleasantries. EarthCore is then able to destroy just enough missiles to prevent the elemental core's ignition, then make a stand against Metlar's appropriate statue soldiers, while Metlar himself does some HR.
A simple desire to save our own skins.
Do you fear death more than you fear me?
Unless Metlar really can steal souls, I'd argue that the threat of death is his only real influence. Yet he's enough to intimidate both monsters, and so they once again turn on EarthCore. Except that now, finally, all the protagonists are united. Leading each Inhumanoid into a trap, the Redwoods dump Decompose into a liquid amber pool. That's not how amber works. I mean, I give 80s cartoons a lot of leeway when it comes to science, but hardened tree resin isn't an obscure fact. But supposing that this is a pool of tree resin, that just begs a question. Where did they get so much?
He has a point. Quiet, Ransom.
The granites shove Tendril back into his 50 Shades of Grey cell, and Magnacore resumes his vigil, trapping Metlar in a magnetic field. I can't help but feel he got shortchanged. As for Blackthorn, thus we can finally bring about the resolution.
Well, gentlemen, and Sandra.
EarthCore is now back in the government's good graces. Blackthorn is arrested, and the team can look forward to a few sexual harassment lawsuits.
So, Sandra, what did you say you were doing for dinner?
You're the fourth guy who's asked me that in the last 10 minutes.
But we can't end on a note.
Now, where did that tendril sample go? Oh well, I'm sure it'll turn up sooner or later.
Indeed, the series would transition into its own half-hour show. Blackthorn would unearth even more Inhumanoid creatures, and they would war upon one another. EarthCore would add more members to its roster, all male, and the fight would never reach a true conclusion. Each episode would lead into another, which was a very innovative format for the time. Dare I say that it relied heavily on continuity.
Can the EarthCore stop this evil before it's too late?
But even my beloved continuity wasn't enough to keep it going past one season. There were plans to introduce even more allies and enemies, and there were even a few Season 2 scripts written, one of which would feature EarthCore encountering the actual devil underground.
Could it be Satan?
But the production price for the centerpiece monsters was too high for Hasbro. Parents weren't willing to spend so much money on grotesqueries. Thus, the toy line and the show came to a close. All this commentary makes me think back on when I first saw this as a kid. I didn't think about sexism, propaganda, or what kind of message this show presented. I was too busy watching the scary imagery, which leads to a question. What do you do when something you enjoyed as a child seems less appealing in adulthood? Well, first, be proud of your growth. You're more alert and more aware now. Not everyone can claim that. Second, ask yourself what you liked about the show as a kid and if that still applies. For me, Inhumanoids was a fright fest. Monsters in the dark, the threat of corruption and death, and even humanity's allies could look creepy. And finally, ask yourself if these positives are enough to outweigh the negatives. In this case, they are not. Plenty of 80s cartoons are products of their time and reflect our past mistakes. However, at their core, I usually find that they speak to more archetypal ideals, including a strong concern for others. I don't see that with Inhumanoids. I see the shell of 80s action stars put into situations where they can quip and act tough, but get past that surface presentation and there's nothing more. Plus their attitude towards female characters, the lack of humanity based on current politics, and some jokes that really turn sour with time. This is an element of my childhood that I'll remember, but I'm happy to leave in the past. I'm Silver-Quill. Thanks for watching.